sounds like the burden of this response piece falls a lot on our staff members, right? And it sounds like it's a burden of a response that is different than what they may have experienced also as staff members in the past through those policies that were in place that you acknowledge, right, impacted the student experience.
Yeah.
How has the staff experience been impacted based off our new policies, and like how have you been leading and supporting teachers?
Yeah, I one thing I'll say is I've never taught in a pandemic. And I can't imagine what it means to right now be a teacher in the midst of a pandemic, while also grappling with what that means when it comes to like working to be more anti-racist. And I think like just that intersection of those things makes it hard. Because like we are like really working intentionally to reimagine those practices. And I will specifically speak for like our staff at UIC. They've really leaned into that critical reflection and examination process and like really reimagine like what their work with students look like. And I'll name like it's been difficult because we're in a moment where we're transitioning with our practices while in the midst of a global pandemic and adjusting to like being in this space with a lot of people after being away for 18 months. And like, to me, it just makes me think about how the work we're doing is for the long run. So one thing that I've named for folks is like, it's great that you want to reimagine your curriculum. And like, that's not going to be a thing that you may just be able to do this year. It may be a journey, and like maybe you just have to identify small tweaks that you need to make over time. Because like trying to reimagine your curriculum after being away for 18 months in a pandemic may be very difficult. So I think we talk a lot about grace this year and like giving ourselves that grace. And I think is really important, and also honoring like this is part of the transformational process. And transformation is not going to take 3 months, 4 months.
Not at all.
I think, especially after being away for 18 months, maybe it's going to take 18 months longer to do that. And like, how do we create some pacing for that journey, and knowing that like we're not trying to check this box off. We're just continuing to, because I don't think anti-racism is a thing where like we will say we have crossed the bridge and we are now anti-racist. It is an ongoing, evolving process. And how do we like pace ourselves to lean into that work and not like overwhelm ourselves, because we already got enough going on as it is. And no one has ever done the thing we're doing in the midst of a pandemic, let alone doing the thing we're doing in general within the context of, like I said earlier, education in America.
Yeah. So this is a journey. And part of that journey, there are checkpoints through a journey. Checkpoints in which we hope that when we get there, that there are moments of success. And sometimes we get to those checkpoints, there may be moments of disappointment, or maybe moments in which we identify we need to do some refining. At this point in the school year, are you able to identify any points of success or wins at this current checkpoint in this journey?
I think the first week of school speaks to the checkpoints, and I also think it speaks to how this year has felt. So first day of school, we like there was like a half a day, and then the second half was like a block party where we like moved all the cars out the parking lot, and like students came, like we just like had food and everything. And like a good headline for that first day of school, which speaks to both the win but also the roller coaster of this year, is like it ranged from teachers participating in a dunk tank to like students and staff doing a Cupid Shuffle. Sidebar, we posted on our Instagram, and like Cupid Shuffle responded and said that the staff members did better.
Nice.
But it went from like doing a Cupid Shuffle and building so much great community to it also being a physical confrontation as well. And I think like that like speaks to like the nature of our year, where there's so many amazing things happening, and then like some of that violence that is just true about what's happening in our city is like also starting to impact our schools. And I think that's just a product of like the amount of trauma that our communities have been just exposed to as a result of being in a pandemic. And like we live in Chicago, and how that has also impacted just our city. And like the win in that is like we built some great community, we had an altercation, but then we was also able to get the families to come in and do a mediation, and we found out that the parents knew each other, and like they were able to resolve it, and like students were fine and like came back to school. And I think that just speaks to like what the nature of this school year is. And I think there's like so many amazing things happen alongside of like we do have some challenges when it comes to like reimagining that, because I'll name it like that took time. It wasn't as easy as like I'm calling home, this child is suspended, they can't come back for the next 5 days.
To give people some perspective, right? As a former teacher, right, or your understanding of what that process looks like when an altercation occurs, what opportunities were present this year that were not available or were widely used in the past?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece is like a mediation. I think in the past, just like both, and I speak to both my experience as a student, as a teacher, as a leader, like in the past, it's been more around like, how do we hold kids accountable after they've had that altercation versus like, how do we think about our responses so they can learn from it and then engage our families in this process. And I think that spoke to just like such a restorative and transformational process. The thing I'll name that's true is it took time.
It did.
And I think that's part of what we're learning right now is like, this is, I believe, that's a right way of responding so then that we can honor the humanity of our students and honor their stories, because sometimes like we don't know what our students are carrying and what times some things may serve as a trigger, and like our kids are still kids and like there's still some development going on in their brains, and sometimes they may make a decision that may not always be the right decision in our eyes. And I think that process really spoke to like how we can respond to it. But I'll name like, that's hard. It took some time. Like we had to get the students in a certain place and then like make sure that they was in a good space, had a mediation and call home. And like, so I understand that like, that's part of that piece I spoke about earlier with like practices and policies. We have a policy in place now due to the Noble Community Pact that tells us this is a good way to respond. And now we're trying to ask ourselves like, how do our practices keep up with something like that? And like, what are some things we need to reimagine and restructure? And I don't think by any means we figured it out yet. I think we have some work to do to make sure that like, it creates some sustainability from a staff experience perspective. Yeah. And also it continues to honor our students. So then like, it creates, like I said earlier, that predictability. Because I think we still need some work. We have more work to do in ensuring that our processes are more predictable so that then they can become sustainable. And I think that is what was true about our old system, is that although it was very punitive, it was predictability, and it also gave staff the capacity to implement it. And now we're trying to figure out what can that predictability and capacity and lift look like under the Noble Community Pact.
So you talked a lot about having these predictable practices for our students. But is it possible to have predictable practices that also lead to equitable student experiences?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's a question that I believe we need to continue to grapple with. I think yes to that question, because I think predictability it encompasses, I believe that predictability encompasses consistency, but it's not only consistency. I think there are some elements of like things being the same that is valuable, but like I think to me when I think about predictability, it's around our response. Like how do we create predictability in our response and ensure that it is rooted in an equitable experience? So maybe like to me, I think about that, it's all about the lens that we are seeing our response to like either there's an infraction or support for a student, like how are we seeing our response and how are we making sure that like our systems are predictable in a way, and I would name this maybe even the clearest way for me thinking about is like in a way that I can have someone else sit in that same space and be able to like implement like that response or that system. And I think that's part of the process where I think we have to do more imagination, because I also mean like I think that's what makes us as an organization special is our ability to be predictable, and I think we can do that in a way that is also equitable. And I think part of that process and how we do that exists in the ongoing process of examining how we're doing in that area. So I think that's the beautiful thing about being anti-racist. Like we're not trying to say, here is the thing and we stop. We're saying like, here it is, kind of what you were talking about. This is where we're at. How are we doing? Maybe that's a checkpoint. And then like, now let's talk about, is there another way to refine it? But yeah, short answer, absolutely. I think long answer is hard. And I'll also aim like that is the work. In my opinion, is like, how do we create a predictable experience for our students that is equitable, and it also creates a sense of belonging. Folks take away, if they don't take away anything else, is I continue to grapple with ensuring that I am not